Picture this for a moment. It's a cold winter evening somewhere in suburban Canada, sometime in the mid-1970s. Outside, snow quietly blankets the streets. Inside, the warm glow of a living room fills the space, not from a fireplace, but from a massive wooden television set sitting proudly against the wall. The whole family is gathered around it. No one is scrolling, no one is distracted. Every eye is fixed on that glowing screen.
But why? Why did nearly every Canadian living room in the 1970s revolve around one of these enormous wood console televisions? To understand that, we have to step back into a very different world. A world where television wasn't just entertainment, it was the heart of the home. The 1970s in Canada were a time of quiet transformation. The country was growing, suburbs were expanding, and more families were settling into comfortable middle-class lives. Owning a home was becoming more common, and with that came a desire to create a space that felt complete, a space that felt modern, and nothing symbolized that modern lifestyle more than a television. But not just any television. In Canada during this era, the television wasn't a small plastic box tucked into a corner. It was a centerpiece, a statement, a massive wooden console that looked more like a piece of furniture than a piece of technology. Television culture itself was exploding. Canadian households were tuning in nightly, watching everything from local programming to American imports, news, hockey games, variety shows. These weren't just programs, they were shared experiences. There were fewer channels, fewer distractions, and fewer choices, but somehow that made each moment feel more important, more intentional. And at the center of it all sat that giant console TV. Now, if you've never seen one in person, it's hard to imagine just how big these televisions were. We're talking about units that could stretch several feet wide, built with thick wooden cabinets, sometimes even featuring sliding doors to hide the screen when it wasn't in use. Why so large? Part of it was purely technological. Back then, television sets relied on bulky cathode ray tubes, heavy, deep, and difficult to shrink. There was no such thing as a slim screen or a wall-mounted display. Everything inside the TV required space, lots of it. But technology alone doesn't explain the design, because these weren't just machines, they were furniture. In the 1970s, Canadian homes were filled with rich wooden textures, coffee tables, cabinets, bookshelves. So when televisions entered the home, they had to fit in. Manufacturers didn't want these new devices to feel out of place seamlessly with the rest of the living room. And so, television sets were designed like elegant wooden consoles. Polished finishes, carved details, warm tones. Some even matched the exact style of the family's other furniture. It wasn't just about watching TV. It was about how the TV looked when it was turned off. You could walk into a living room and see a console television that looked almost like a cabinet or a sideboard. Technology. It whispered, home. And that design choice had a powerful effect. Because once the TV became part of the furniture, it became part of everyday life. Evenings in a 1970s Canadian home often followed a familiar rhythm. Dinner would end, dishes would be cleared, and slowly, the family would gather in the living room. The father might take his usual seat. The mother settles nearby. Kids sprawl across the carpet, sometimes arguing over what to watch. There's a soft click as the TV powers on. A faint hum fills the room. The screen flickers to life, not instantly, but gradually, like it's waking up. Sometimes the picture isn't perfect. One of the kids might be sent over to adjust the antenna. They twist it slightly, then a bit more, until finally the image clears. "Hold it right there," someone calls out. And for a moment, everything feels just right. This wasn't passive viewing. It was interactive in its own small way. You didn't just consume television. You worked with it, adjusted it, lived around it.
And then came the shows. Families laughed together, reacted together, even sat through commercials together. The television created shared moments, moments that stuck. In a time before personal devices, before on-demand streaming, there was something deeply communal about the experience. You didn't choose your own entertainment. You shared it. And because of that, the television became more than just an object. It became a gathering place. But there was another layer to this story, one that had less to do with emotion and more to do with identity. Because in the 1970s, owning a large console television wasn't just practical. It was a status symbol. These TVs were expensive. Not everyone could afford the biggest, most beautifully crafted models. So when a family brought one into their home, it said something. It said, "We've made it." Guests would come over, and the television would quietly command attention. Its size, its design, its presence, it all signaled a certain level of success. In some homes, the TV wasn't even turned on during visits. It didn't need to be. Its mere presence was enough. And for many families, buying one of these televisions was a major investment. It wasn't something you replaced every few years. It was something you planned for, saved for, and then kept for a long time. That's why they were built to last. Solid wood cabinets, durable components. These TVs were designed to be part of the home for years, even decades. But as with all things, change was coming. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, technology began to evolve. Televisions slowly started to shrink. Materials changed, plastic became more common, designs became more minimal. The focus shifted. Instead of blending into the furniture, TVs began to stand apart from it. They became lighter, more portable, more affordable. And with that shift came a change in how people interacted with them. The living room itself began to change. The TV was still important, but it was no longer the same kind of centerpiece. It didn't carry the same physical weight or the same symbolic weight. And eventually, those massive wooden consoles started to disappear. Some were moved to basements, others were given away. Many simply faded into memory. But their impact remained. Because for an entire generation of Canadians, those televisions weren't just objects. They were part of life's rhythm. They were the quiet witnesses to family conversations, laughter, arguments, celebrations. Softly in the corner of the room, bringing people together in a way that feels almost rare today. And maybe that's the most fascinating part of this story. In a world where we now carry screens in our pockets, where we watch alone, on demand, at any time, it's almost hard to imagine a time when one screen could unite an entire household. When the size of a television wasn't just about technology, but about togetherness. So the next time you see an old photo of a 1970s living room, and you spot that massive wooden console TV sitting proudly against the wall, take a moment, because you're not just looking at a piece of outdated technology. You're looking at the center of a home.